Welcome, dear brave soul. You're tuning into Horror Podcast, and I'm truly grateful you're here. Whether you're a long-time listener or just stumbled upon this channel, thank you for joining me for another scary tale. If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and means more than you know. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from, what brought you here, or even what kind of story you'd like to hear next. Your support keeps this channel going, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Now, let's get into today's horror story. When I was younger, I took a summer workshop in metal sculpture at a small art center tucked in the hills of North Carolina. It was the kind of place where people came to disconnect, focus on their craft, and spend long days sweating in the studio while the cicadas buzzed outside. The setting itself was almost surreal. An old converted farm with wide barns turned into studios, tools clanging from morning until well after dark, and the air always carrying a mix of iron dust and summer humidity. My instructor was a guy in his 40s, built like someone who spent as much time lifting steel as he did shaping it. He was approachable, always cracking jokes, but his appearance told another story if you looked close enough. There were deep scars cutting across his shoulders and down the back of his neck, lines so thick and raised they looked like melted wax frozen in place. A brutal line ran down one side of his face, starting at his hairline, crossing his eye, and ending at his jaw. He wore tank tops that showed tattoos climbing up his arms, old and faded in places but still strong in color. The one that caught everyone's attention, though, wasn't on his arms. It was the massive piece across his back. It was a coiled serpent, scales in bright reds and greens, wrapped around a utility blade. The blade itself was inked in sharp metallic tones, so realistic it looked like you could pull it off his skin. The serpent's jaws were open, fangs bared, coiling protectively around it like it was treasure. When one of us asked him about it, he paused for a long moment, gave this quiet, almost tired smile, and said, "That one's not just decoration." Then, maybe because we had earned a little of his trust after days of working beside him, he told us how he got the scars and why the box cutter mattered. My name's Alex, and I'll never forget that story. The details, the way he told it, even the look in his eyes when he spoke, it burned into me, and even now I can hear his voice when I think about it. He said that before he was working in metal, before he had students and commissions and a steady life, he'd spent years in and out of addiction. Crack, meth, whatever he could get his hands on. He admitted it without shame, not like he was proud of it, but like he had accepted the truth of it as a part of who he had been. Back then he hustled drugs as much as he used them, and he carried himself like someone who had nothing to lose. That recklessness bled into everything, into the way he spoke, the way he moved, the way he lived. He also used to box on the side. Amateur fights, gyms and strip malls, the kind of places that smelled like sweat soaked into the walls. He said the ring gave him a release, something to channel all the chaos into. Even when he was high, even when his lungs burned from smoke and his mind was racing, he had quick hands and a stubbornness that made him hard to knock down. He described the fights like storms, fast, brutal, over in flashes. And he admitted he liked knowing he could hold his own, that people thought twice before stepping to him. One night in the late 90s, he was on the edge of downtown Asheville, walking his bike after a deal. He'd been smoking himself, buzzing, jittery but alert, the way your body hums when you've been riding the high too long and it edges into paranoia. That's when a guy came out of nowhere, shouting at him, demanding he hand over everything he had. He called him a junkie thief, said the crack was his. The man was wild-eyed, wiry, his face drawn tight like he hadn't slept in days. Alex said it was the kind of look that told you reason wasn't an option. He tried to keep it calm at first. He said he didn't want to fight, but the guy didn't care. He lunged, fists swinging, all desperation and rage. Alex threw a punch out of instinct, and the man dropped instantly, hitting the pavement like he was out cold. Alex said he thought it was over, that he could pick up his bike and leave. But then the man twitched, shook his head, and got right back up. Alex shook his head when he told us, saying that if you've ever dealt with someone spun out on crack, you know they don't stay down. Sure enough, the man staggered forward again, eyes fixed on him like a predator that couldn't quit. Alex hit him again, and again. Each time the guy went limp, then snapped back up like nothing had happened, his body refusing to surrender. It was like hitting a wall of nerves that couldn't feel pain. The third time, it changed. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a box cutter. He flicked the blade open with a snap and went at him in a frenzy. Alex said the first slice caught him across the side of the head before he even knew what was happening. It felt like fire tearing through his skin, the warmth flooding immediately. Then another ripped across the back of his neck, a line so deep he could feel air on places that should have been covered. He spun, trying to block, but the blade carved into his shoulder, leaving long lines that burned worse with every movement. It wasn't a clean fight anymore. Alex tried to push him off, but the guy clung to him, slashing, teeth bared like an animal out of its mind. He said he could feel the warmth of blood running down his back, dripping under his waistband, making his shirt cling to him like glue. Every movement stung. Every breath came with the sharp awareness that he was losing blood faster than he could think. He fought harder, throwing everything he had into one last hit, every muscle straining. When a man went down that time, Alex didn't hesitate. He grabbed the box cutter out of his hand and used it himself. He said the motion was automatic, survival taking over in a way that left no room for thought. He stabbed the man again and again in the chest, not counting, just striking until he stopped moving. He told us there was a long pause after, like the world went silent. He didn't say if the man lived or not, just that he didn't wait to find out. He left him there, body heaving, maybe breathing, maybe not. Alex ripped off his shirt, pressed it against his head, and felt the blood pumping through with every heartbeat. He described it as terrifying, like hearing your body clock tick louder and louder, each beat threatening to be the last. He got on his bike and rode to the hospital, 10, maybe 15 minutes, with blood dripping down his arms and back. He told us that people on the street stared, eyes wide, some stepping aside, some crossing the road, but no one stepped in. He kept pedaling, dizzy, vision blurring at the edges, the handlebars slick with blood. At the ER, doctors stitched him up, over 50 stitches across his face and shoulders. He said he lay there listening to the sound of thread pulling skin together, each tug a reminder that he was still alive. The scar that runs through his eye came from that night. It never healed fully straight, leaving that sharp line that cut through every glance he gave. Later, when he was calmer, he admitted to one of us privately that the fight wasn't about random violence. The guy had been trying to take his crack, and Alex was just as deep in the life as him. I was no saint, he said. That blade could have gone either way. Could have been my body on the ground, not his. He said it with no drama, no attempt to scare us, just flat honesty. He never found out what happened to the man after he left. The police never came for him. Nobody filed anything against him. All he had left was the memory, the scars, and eventually the tattoo. A serpent clutching the blade that almost ended him. A reminder that survival doesn't always make you proud, but it keeps you breathing. He said he got the tattoo as a promise to himself, never to forget what living like that cost him, and how close he came to losing everything. Alex told us he's been clean for over a decade now. He has a wife, kids, a business. He teaches metalworking to people like me, laughing in class, steady in his movements, strong in ways that don't show up as much in his body as in his presence. On the outside, he's this steady, tough instructor with a smile that puts people at ease. But every time I think of that tattoo, I think of the night he described, blood pounding with his heartbeat, fighting for his life with nothing but desperation and a box cutter. And it's one of those stories that reminds you just how thin the line is between living and not, between who you were and who you decide to be after. For him, the scars weren't just reminders of pain. They were proof of the night he realized how fragile life could be and how easily it could have ended if one punch had landed differently, if one blade had cut an inch deeper. That night stayed with him, and in hearing it, it stayed with me too. In the late 1990s, Jessica Monroe was on top of the world, a pop star whose face was plastered on magazine covers and music videos. She had risen fast from being a backup dancer to releasing chart-topping singles of her own. Her shows sold out arenas across the country, and fans followed her every move. For a few years, it felt like she was untouchable, one of those rare artists who didn't just perform songs but defined an era. She had the look, the voice, and the kind of stage presence that drew people in and made them feel like she was singing directly to them. She was in commercials, on late-night interviews, smiling for billboards. At 19, she seemed like the future. Critics compared her to the pop icons of the decade before, saying she could go even further. She had that mix of charisma and raw talent that looked unstoppable. But by the early 2000s, Jessica's name was more often spoken in the past tense, and fans wondered what had gone wrong. The fade wasn't sudden, but it was steady. First, fewer appearances. Then, canceled tours. After that, long silences that stretched for years. My name's Daniel, and I remember watching her career unfold. She was everywhere, the kind of celebrity whose image got stuck in your head because you couldn't escape it. Even if you weren't a fan, you knew the lyrics because they played in every store and on every radio. People at school argued about her outfits, her videos, her boyfriends. She was a constant presence, the background noise of youth. And then she wasn't. For a long time, there wasn't an explanation. No public scandal, no retirement announcement. Just a slow fade into silence. It was like watching someone disappear while you were still looking at them. It wasn't until years later that the stories she told began to surface. According to Jessica, everything changed because of a plane crash. She claimed that in 1999, after finishing a show in Dallas, she boarded a small chartered plane with a handful of crew members. She had been exhausted from back-to-back tour dates, the kind of exhaustion you carry in your bones. She just wanted to get home, or at least to the next stop where she could rest. Somewhere over Texas, she said, the plane went down. She described it in detail, the sharp smell of burning wires, the oxygen masks dropping, the violent lurch when the engine cut. She said she was slammed against the cabin wall, her head bouncing so hard she blacked out. When she woke, she was strapped to a stretcher, her body broken, her spine fractured, her neck and shoulders tore apart. She said there were moments she thought she was dying, moments where she begged whoever was near to just let her close her eyes. The injuries, she insisted, were catastrophic. Multiple surgeries followed. Metal rods, screws, plates in her neck, endless physical therapy that she said felt like punishment more than healing. She said that the pain never left her, that it became a constant hum underneath her life, controlling everything she did. Simple things, walking across a room, bending down, even laughing, sent sharp waves through her body. That was when, according to her, the addiction began. Prescriptions for painkillers blurred into dependency, and dependency became a grip she couldn't escape. The story had weight to it because it explained the gap, the years she seemed to disappear, the time she looked frail when she did make public appearances, the erratic interviews where she seemed distracted or confused. It made sense of the way her once fluid dancing became hesitant, her movements stiff. But there was one problem. There was no record of the crash. The National Transportation Safety Board keeps meticulous logs of every U.S. aviation accident, and no entry matches her description. No reports in the Dallas area in 1999 list her name. No hospital confirmed treating her for emergency injuries that night. No crew members have ever stepped forward. The news at the time carried no stories about a plane crash involving a major celebrity. And in the world of late 1990s pop, something like that would have been headline news for weeks. Jessica didn't bring it up right away either. The first time she mentioned it publicly was more than a decade later, in the 2010s, when she was trying to mount a comeback. During an interview, she spoke candidly about her struggle with pain and with addiction, and for the first time, she framed it all as the aftermath of a crash. She said, "That night changed me. I should have died. Instead I lived, but I lived in pieces." The way she told it was vivid, too vivid to be easy to dismiss. She painted the picture of the cabin, the flashing lights, the metallic taste in her mouth when the pressure dropped. She remembered the way her vision narrowed when she woke on the stretcher, how voices sounded far away. But skeptics pointed out the gaps. Why hadn't she said anything earlier? Why had nobody else spoken about it? A plane crash, especially involving a celebrity, should have been a headline story, not a hidden tragedy. Some argued that maybe she misremembered, that she was in an accident of some kind, but exaggerated the details over time. Others thought it was possible she had fabricated it entirely, an attempt to explain away her addictions and her absence from the spotlight. For those who wanted to believe, though, the scars she carried seemed to tell their own story. Jessica had visible marks on her shoulders and neck. She walked stiffly. Her movements on stage, when she eventually returned, were restricted compared to her past performances. She seemed older than her age, worn down by something invisible. I remember one fan describing her comeback tour as haunting. She could still sing, but her body was tense, like every step cost her something. The lights and costumes were there, but she looked diminished, hollowed out by years of fighting something invisible. The crowd still cheered, but the energy was different, muted, almost protective. Whether or not the plane crash had happened, the consequences were real. Jessica herself doubled down on her story. She said she'd been silenced by contracts, by the industry's desire to cover it up. She said nobody wanted her weakness publicized at the height of her fame. According to her, executives thought the image of an injured pop princess would tank her career, so they buried it. Whether or not that was true, it explained the missing records to her supporters. It gave them something to cling to, a reason to accept that the story nobody could confirm was still real. And that's what makes her story so unnerving. You're left caught between two truths: the undeniable fact of her decline and the missing evidence of the crash that she swore had broken her. It's a reminder of how fragile lives can unravel, and how addiction feeds on pain whether the cause is clear or not. If she exaggerated, maybe it was because she needed a story large enough to hold the weight of what she endured. If she didn't, then it's terrifying to think something that big could vanish from the record completely. Jessica still stands by her story to this day. She says the crash is the reason she's alive, but forever changed. The reason she disappeared, the reason she fought with pills and surgeries and nights she can't remember. But without documentation, without evidence, it sits in limbo. A story that may be truth, maybe memory warped by trauma, or maybe a desperate way to explain wounds that never healed. What's certain is that something destroyed her. Something took the brightest years of her career and left her chasing relief that never came. Whether it was a crash in the Texas night sky or the slow, grinding wreckage of addiction, she lived through it. And for those who once saw her as untouchable, that reality is maybe the most haunting part of all. I worked at a county office for several years, the kind of place where things move slowly and nothing dramatic ever seemed to happen. Every summer we get interns from the local colleges. Most were fine, some were lazy, a few were awkward, and occasionally we had to deal with minor scandals like kids sneaking into the file room to make out. But overall, they were just young people trying to pad their resumes. In 2018, though, something different happened. We were told we'd be getting an intern halfway through the summer, which was unusual. His name was Dustin, and unlike the other interns, who were usually college sophomores or juniors, he was closer to 30. At first, I thought that might actually be a good thing. Most of my coworkers were decades older than me, and the other interns were teenagers. I was 27 at the time, stuck in that awkward middle ground. So, when Dustin arrived, I was almost relieved to finally have someone closer to my age around. My name's Claire, and I didn't realize at the time how quickly that relief would turn into unease. At first, Dustin didn't seem threatening. He was overly friendly, maybe too much so, but I brushed it off as enthusiasm. He asked a lot of questions about the office, about me, about my hobbies. He lingered in my cubicle, but not in a way that immediately set off alarms. It felt more like he was trying too hard to make a friend. I'd occasionally have lunch with him or chat when we both had downtime, because frankly, the work could be boring and I was grateful for conversation. But it didn't take long before everyone else in the office started to complain about him. He barely did any of the tasks assigned to him. He'd show up late or not at all, sometimes walking in hours after his shift started. One day, he strolled in around 3:30 when we were scheduled to leave at 5, acting like nothing was wrong. Our office manager was furious, but nothing happened. Dustin seemed untouchable. Later, he told me why. His position wasn't really earned. His uncle had connections, donations to the county commissioner's campaign, and Dustin had been placed there as a favor. He knew it too. He said it with a little smirk, like rules didn't apply to him. As the summer wore on, his behavior toward me shifted. When he found out I was planning to leave the office in a few weeks for a new job in another state, he latched onto the news. He kept telling me how unfair it was that I was leaving just as we were starting to become friends. At first I laughed it off, but his comments got more insistent, more whiny, like he was trying to guilt me for moving. He lingered by my desk constantly, talking over my coworkers, ignoring their annoyed looks. One afternoon, as I was leaving, Dustin offered me a ride home. I usually took the bus, but coworkers had given me rides before, and I didn't think much of it. I said yes. When we got to his car, it smelled awful, filled with fast food wrappers and empty bottles. He shoved trash off the seat and apologized. I try not to judge. On the road, he kept asking, begging, really, that we stop for dinner. I finally agreed, just to make him stop asking, and we pulled into a diner. To my surprise, the conversation was pleasant. He was sharp, opinionated, funny in a slightly offbeat way. I actually relaxed. When I suggested he didn't need to drive me all the way home, he insisted, and I gave in. But as we got closer, he started again about how much it sucked that I was moving. His voice had this whiny edge to it that wore me down. When I pointed out the turn for my street, he suddenly accelerated and blew past it, laughing. I laughed too, but nervously. "Okay, funny," I said, "turn around up here." But instead of turning, he started begging me not to go home yet, saying he was lonely, that we should hang out more. That's when the alarm bells went off. I was trapped in a man's car, a man I didn't really know, who clearly didn't respect boundaries, and who wasn't stable enough to hold a basic internship. My instinct told me not to panic, not to yell or demand he let me out, because that could escalate things. Instead, I tried to redirect. I suggested we could go to the park near my house and talk more there. He liked the idea and pulled over. At the park, things took another strange turn. The conversation started off normal. Then he dumped his entire life story on me. His arrest for theft, his heroin addiction, his depression. It was so much, so fast. I tried to nod sympathetically, but inside I was reeling. I hadn't realized he was still using until he slipped and admitted it, saying he'd been to a neighborhood known for dealers just the day before. The thought hit me like a punch. I had been in a car he was driving while high. The longer we sat there, the more erratic he became. He started giving me compliments, calling me smart, pretty, different from other people. Then, in the same breath, he broke down into this weird sobbing fit. No tears, just this rasping, wheezy sound. He begged me not to hate him, begged me to be his friend, begged me to understand. I sat frozen, torn between fear and irritation, trying to keep my voice calm while inside my heart was racing. Finally, I stood up and said I was tired and wanted to go home. He kept crying, but when I joked about forgetting my bag in his car, he immediately stopped and ran to unlock it for me. His mood flipped instantly, almost like nothing had happened. I grabbed my things, and he calmly offered to drop me off. I agreed, but had him leave me a block away, so he wouldn't know exactly where I lived. That should have been the end of it. But a week later, I moved across the country for my new job, and Dustin kept texting. Long, rambling messages about how much he missed me, how unfair it was we didn't have more time, how he wished things had been different. I never responded. After a few weeks, the text stopped, and I figured I was finally rid of him. Months later, I got a text from a former coworker with a link to a news article. The headline read, "Local man charged in fatal stabbing." It was Dustin. His mugshot stared back at me. He wasn't the victim, he was the attacker. I called an old colleague who filled me in. Not long after I left, Dustin was finally fired after trashing the men's bathroom, throwing trash, breaking things, smearing soap everywhere. After that, he lost his apartment and ended up on the streets, squatting in abandoned houses in one of the roughest neighborhoods in the city. That's where the stabbing happened. The details were thin, but it seemed like a drug deal gone bad, or maybe a robbery. Either way, Dustin had killed a man. I remember sitting in my apartment, thousands of miles away, staring at that article and thinking about the night he drove past my street. The night he cried and begged and told me he was high. I kept replaying it, wondering what would have happened if I had pushed harder, if I had demanded to be let out of the car, if I had angered him. I don't know if I handled it well, or if I just got lucky. Looking back, Dustin was hands down the worst intern we ever had. Not because he was lazy, or weird, or clingy, but because beneath all of that, he was someone collapsing under the weight of addiction and untreated issues. And I had gotten too close without realizing the danger until it was almost too late.